Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. I'm bringing back more Craigslist stories tonight. With that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. I met Mary outside a bar in the busiest city on Earth. She was trying to light a cigarette with matches, but wind from a passing storm reached in and snuffed out each attempt. She tried moving, then she tried shielding the flame with the sleeves of her massively oversized hoodie and the bulk of her long blonde hair. Eventually, the rain won out, and her pack of matches ran out as well. She plopped down onto the dirty sidewalk in disappointment, with the unlit Marlboro still between her thin lips. I ended the phone call with my sister and wordlessly offered my Zippo. She nodded graciously, lit the menthol, and took a deep inhale. Then, after a cough, stuck out her hand. "I'm Mary. Can I offer you one for the trouble?" I told her that I didn't smoke. "So, you're standing outside offering drunk girls lighters. That's creepy, man. There has to be a better story, right?" I told her it was my dad's lighter. I told her that he passed away recently. This week, actually. I told her that my sister just called and I had to leave the bar because we were in the midst of planning his funeral. The words just sort of tumbled out of me like a virus, and this poor girl who probably just wanted to smoke her cigarette in peace listened to it all so patiently and perfectly. I was hooked the moment she even replied. "Look, I can tell you how sorry I am. I can tell you that your father is in a better place. I can tell you that everything is for the best and that there is any sense in this shit whatsoever. But there just isn't. Life just sucks sometimes. It's not fair. And that's all there is to it. There's only one thing we can do." "Yeah? What's that?" I asked. "Get screwed up," she replied. Her optimism made me smile. My phone buzzed nervously in my pocket. Cindy probably wanted to close the deal on a coffin. The stress of my father's upcoming burial weighed down on me like an anvil. But the mystery girl piqued my interest. I ignored the call and tilted my head back towards the bar suggestively. "Not here. I know a better spot." Mary smiled naughtily and produced a glitter-covered flask of whiskey from beneath her hoodie. I laughed. But before I could offer a comment about the design, she did something that caught me completely off guard. She kissed me. Then she took off down the street. There seemed to be three options. I could go back inside, watch the band, and listen to my miserable friends argue about politics. I could call my sister back and plot funeral details. Or I could follow the beautiful mystery girl with a flask of whiskey. I hesitated for a moment. I thought about it, and ultimately chose the latter. I sprinted after her. The rain made it tough to keep up. I shouted for Mary to slow down. I caught her turning a corner, and she yelled something back through the storm. It was hard to hear. "Hurry! Please!" The alcohol from earlier started to kick in. I slipped and fell on the second turn. The storm turned into an avalanche of water as I surveyed my wounds like a baby. I ducked under a storefront for cover and awkwardly tried to wipe blood from the scrapes on my hands. I yelled for Mary to come back. I even went back out in the rain, a moment later, and tried to follow her path. But the city street stayed empty and creepy at 3 in the morning. No one responded, and no one showed up. She was gone. I hoped she just got turned around, too. I hoped that maybe she got lost or saw the time and realized she needed to catch a train. But a voice in the back of my head said she probably thought I ditched her. That made me uncomfortable. We shared such a connection. The hopeless romantic in me felt like I missed the potential love of my life. And so, I did something creepy. Not something I would normally do. I posted to Craigslist missed connection section. I made the ad sound as generic as possible. It didn't even include her name. Mystery Girl from the Bar by Port Authority. You kissed me and said to meet me somewhere else. I lost you. Hoping we can connect again. Tell me your name. 2 days later, I got a response. Is this Matt? Is all it said. I replied immediately and asked if it was Mary. She said yes. She sounded excited and most of all, legitimate. She even described my clothing that night. We talked for hours, and Mary seemed even more perfect once we got to know each other online. She came from a single-parent household. She lived in the same city, and she loved pizza. We communicated through text for a couple weeks, and talked about a lot of small stuff like that. I begged her to meet me in person. I asked to talk on the phone, or video chat, or literally anything else other than text, but Mary always came up with excuses. That changed the night of my 23rd birthday. Mary promised to make an appearance. She told me to make sure no one else came by the apartment. She wanted alone time, allegedly, and that concept immediately made my adolescent mind wander. So, I cleaned up the place in a dazed panic, and did my best to make myself look presentable. The last text before our meetup came at 6:30. See you soon. There's something I need to explain. I got ready and kept my panicked mind at ease by cleaning the place up. The time crept by, but finally, someone knocked on the front door at exactly 7 o'clock sharp. I rushed towards it, but something made me look out the window first, and thank God I did. Standing at the front door was a disheveled, middle-aged man. He held a bouquet of roses in one hand, in the other, just outside of the streetlight's line of sight. He pushed a pistol up against the door. I called the police. The man looked around my apartment a little. I watched him from the window. He avoided the neighbors' suspicious glances. He tried to hide in the shadows. When the cops arrived, he tried to run, but they tackled him before long. I rushed outside to accost the person who claimed to be the love of my life. I shouted in his face while the police begged me to go back inside. He ignored my questions. He scoffed when I asked about Mary. After a quick pat-down, the officer recovered his weapon. Then they pulled a second mysterious object from the man's coat pocket. It was a pink whiskey flask, covered in glitter. 3 weeks later, my Craigslist connection was indicted for second-degree murder. That's the last time I used Craigslist. My family had just gotten into skiing, and instead of buying new equipment, I decided to get some used stuff to start out. Skiing equipment is so damn expensive, and had hoped to get into the new sport for as cheap as possible, just in case it didn't stick. I was visiting my office in early January and had looked up some deals on Craigslist, and hoped to find some decent cheap equipment. You see, I travel a great deal for work and occasionally go to my office, and since I was in town and heading home for the weekend, I thought it would be a good idea to see what kind of deals I could find locally. Boy, do I regret that decision. I was scrolling through the listings and came across a promising listing complete with pictures and lots of equipment. I replied to the posting via email since there was no number to call. I got a reply within minutes and was given an address to get to the place. I made arrangements to meet up with him the next day. After work, the evening I was going to head home, I drove to the address and knocked on the front door. The place was a large older house, not very well kept, and secluded from the other houses nearby by trees and a rather large hedgerow. The porch was littered with garbage bags full of who knows what, and the odor was something that I have never smelled before or would ever want to again. The guy answered the door and was about the most shabby dude that never slept in a cardboard box that I have ever seen. We shook hands and he invited me into his home. I'm not gonna lie to you, this dude creeped me out. I should have just made some kind of excuse up and hightailed it out of there. The guy explained to me that all the skiing stuff is in the basement and began walking away, motioning for me to follow him. I reluctantly did, keeping my head on the swivel and keeping close to him in the narrow, cramped hallway. He led me through the kitchen and walked down a short flight of steps to the landing, and then turned and descended down another longer flight of steps. As I followed him, I tried to keep a conversation going, and tried to keep my heartbeat under 120 BPM. We got down to the bottom of the long staircase, and all I could think to myself is this is like the Silence of the Lambs, and this dude is gonna whip out the lotion at any second. We passed several closed doors, and I tried to guess which one had his skin suit behind it. There, at the end of the hall, was a large room, brightly lit with an impressive array of gently used skiing equipment. I walked over to the neatly arranged rows of boots and poles and skis and began browsing. I commented to him that this place was nice and that he had a good collection of items on display. Just as he was about to respond to me, there was a loud banging noise from the back of the room, behind a large partition that was obscured from view. "Must be the furnace. It makes all kinds of noises when it kicks on," the guy said. I chuckled nervously, and nodded, and went back to try to pick some shit out to pay the guy for, and boogie the hell out of there. I heard another louder bang from the same direction and said to the guy, "You should really take a look at that. It doesn't sound too good." I said flatly, "Yeah, give me a minute. I'll be right back," he said, and walked towards the sound. Curiosity almost killed the cat in this situation. I crept closer to the partition, strained my ears, and heard the guy whispering in a low, angry tone to something, and a few loud, sharp thuds on something metallic. The guy came around the corner just as I turned around to sneak back to the ski equipment. "Were you spying on me?" he asked, with venom dripping in his voice. "No, not at all. I was just looking to see if I could lend you a hand. Then you came back around the corner," I blurted out, not thinking of anything better to say. "I don't believe you. You were spying on me. What did you hear? What did you see?" he roared. "Nothing. I didn't hear anything that you were whispering to your furnace," I said, and continued. "Hey, old furnaces are a bitch and need some tough love sometimes," I stammered. At this point, I was slowly backing away from the guy, and he kept advancing. I walked backwards into the piles of skis and ski poles. Just as I bumped into them, I saw a flash of silver in the guy's right hand, and as I focused on it, I saw a wicked hooked blade that looked something out of a nightmare. I held my left hand out in front of me, and felt around behind my back for something, anything to use as a weapon. The guy took a step towards me, brandishing the knife with evil intent. My hands clamped around the grip of a pretty sturdy ski pole, and I lunged towards him, swinging it in a brutal arc, hoping to brain the guy and run like hell. The guy stepped back about half a step to avoid the swing. Instead of the pole whacking him in the side of the head, the knurled tip of the pole raked a deep trench across his face from left to right, from his left eyebrow to his right cheek. He howled in pain and grabbed his face as the blood started to flow. I swung the pole in an upward trajectory into his crotch and ran like the devil himself was chasing me, up the stairs and through the rest of the house. I burst through the front door, ran for my car, and dialed 911. The police showed up a few minutes later and ran into the house, guns at the ready. I gave my statement later that evening and went home. I saw on my news feed a few days later that the guy had 5 women in cages in his basement, and they found the bodies of 8 more in a crawl space under the front porch. I vowed to myself that that was the last time I would ever use Craigslist. So, a few months back, I was laid off from my job due to unforeseen circumstances on the part of the company. I sent as many resumes as I could for about a month, but got nothing in return. When my bank account began to dry out and my depression took over, I resorted to searching for a job on Craigslist. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Believe me, I share the same eerie feeling to anything remotely related to them. I myself heard a few tales from jobs gone wrong, or almost, but, mind you, I was desperate and practically broke. Rent in New York City is the stuff of nightmares, and my only other options were selling my organs or turning into a cam girl, and I'm neither healthy enough to have valuable insides or have the naked disposition to be, well, naked. I began my deep dive into the world of odd and potentially fatal job offers. Most were short-term, low-paying gigs, but one in particular caught my attention. Full-time, live-in nanny needed for upper-class family, above average salary. I clicked on it. My wife and I are looking for a full-time live-in nanny to help take care of our baby, 8 months boy. We live in a 5-acre estate in Far Hills, New Jersey. Nanny will be accommodated in a room of her choosing, provided it's on the first floor where the rest of the staff resides, and will have full assistance from the housekeepers. The nanny must have at least 4 years of experience with the care of infants. References will be needed and checked. Speak English fluently. Know CPR and basic notions of emergency care. Tend to my child's every need. Knowing French is desired, but not obligatory. If hired, the nanny will receive financial compensation of $1,000 per week, always paid on Sundays at 5 p.m. Do not contact us with unsolicited services or offers. I didn't have most of that, but for $1,000 per week, I could be a flying purple giraffe if they wanted me to. I convinced 2 of my friends to pass as former employees. And about the CPR thing, what were the odds of a toddler needing it anyways? I applied. He called me back the next day, wanting to arrange an interview in Loco. He said the house was a mansion. I couldn't even guess how many rooms it had, but it was pretty far away from the rest of the city. Mr. Leclerc was a somber-looking man with a weird gaze to him. Every time he looked at me, his eyes did this thing. This continuous moving from side to side, this twitchy little shake, looking in me rather than at me. Honestly, it freaked me out, but luckily he traveled most of the time anyways. Mrs. Leclerc, on the other hand, was a stay-at-home mom. She was much younger than him too, even though her sickly appearance probably added some years to her face. She spent most of her days locked inside her room in the dark, without talking to anyone. She was probably suffering from PPD, but wasn't being properly treated for it. One thing I forgot to mention, I wasn't actually allowed to care for the child. Not physically, at least. His nursery was always locked, and on his father's absence, Anna was the only one with the key. It was her duty to care for the child, he said, but since she wasn't in her best health, I was to assist her with it. So, my job was to glue myself to the baby monitor, and at any sign of distress from the baby, I was to alert Mr. Leclerc, and she would tend to him. Anna was unable to produce milk, so one of my duties was to prepare his formula so she could feed it to him. Another weird thing, the house was filled with portraits and paintings of Mr. Leclerc on many different occasions, but none from Anna. The staff didn't say anything when I mentioned it, and she wasn't a great conversationalist, even on her best days, so I dropped it. Maybe she was shy, maybe she had body dysmorphia, maybe she had a devil's soul inside her body, and the photos would reveal her real identity. I didn't know, and didn't care. Aside from having constant nightmares and waking up every morning feeling sore and a little foggy-minded, I had no complaints. The money was that good. Lucien was a quiet baby for the most part, except he would always have this exaggerated crying fits in the middle of the night, and would only stop after Anna went there to comfort him, always behind closed doors, of course. The weeks passed and she looked sicker by the minute. I called the family doctor to check on her, but he simply said she just needed to rest, and prescribed some more sleeping pills and a couple of vitamins. The woman looked like the Walking Dead, not like someone who simply lost a few nights of sleep. My gut was telling me that something was wrong. If it was with her or the baby, I didn't know. But I was going to find out. Later that night, I gave Anna double the dose of the sleeping pills, prayed she wouldn't die from it, and got the key from her bedroom when it finally worked. The room was lit by a small reddish lamp that circled the lights on the wall. I could make out very little of the whole picture, mostly only him. The baby was a tiny immobile thing with pale, too pale, skin and frail limbs. For a hot minute, I thought it was some sort of doll, and she was never even pregnant in the first place. Or, God forbid, the baby was dead and every day she was breastfeeding the corpse of what was once her child. Except, I heard him crying every night, so he was definitely alive. I called out to him gently, because somehow it felt rude to get inside his room like that, but he didn't acknowledge any sound I made and just stood there. One of his little arms moved, and then his fingers followed the motion. I was about to go into the other side of the crib, so I could see his face, when he started to cry uncontrollably. His voice reverberated inside my head in a way that made me dizzy. I rested my body against the dresser and saw a clock there, 3 a.m. sharp. In the corner of my eyes, I saw a figure standing by the door. I turned to it, and found Anna standing in the doorway, with a weird look in her eyes, distant almost. I was about to apologize and beg to still keep my job, when she got in and passed me like I wasn't even there. "The baby is crying," she said, picking him up and taking him to the rocking chair. "He wants to be fed." As if trying to make up for my mistake and be useful, I went down the stairs to prepare his formula, but in the midst of it, his crying had stopped. When I got back, the door was slightly open and I got in carefully, not wanting to make any more noise. I turned to give her the bottle and found Anna with the baby resting against her naked breast. My heart sank. The poor girl was trying to feed him, even though she didn't have a drop of milk inside of her. "The bottle," I said lowly. But when she made no attempt to get it from my hands, I moved closer and turned the small floor lamp beside the chair on. A chill ran down my spine and I dropped the bottle on the floor. She was breastfeeding him. His little mouth moved restlessly around her nipple, leaving trails of red around his grayish lips. She was breastfeeding him, only not with milk. My stomach curled into knots and suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe. What the hell was going on there? The wooden floor creaked under my feet and Lucian opened his eyes as if waking from deep sleep. He turned them towards me, slightly, and once again, I needed help standing up. They were as red as the blood on his lips. My mouth went dry. "Isn't he beautiful?" Anna said, caressing his face with her bony fingers. I ran out of there without looking back and got inside my car, not caring about any of my belongings I had left behind, when an involuntary force took over me and I looked back at the house. I saw Anna standing by the window, holding the baby. A shadow approached her from behind, and I soon found out it was Mr. Leclerc. He wasn't even supposed to be there. The dude waved at me as I drove away. A few weeks after I got a new job, a decent real one, where I don't have to tend to creepy demon kids and their zombie mothers. I only have to deal with angry customers from time to time, and I'm more than okay with that. Life isn't perfect, money is still tight, and don't even get me started on the nightmares, but it's good. Calm, or at least it used to be. The thing is, recently I began to lactate too, and it isn't milk. Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your story, my email and subreddit will be in the description below. And also, if you're not subscribed, please do if you want. And don't forget to like and comment as well. Have beautiful nightmares. And I will see you next time.